I think I might be like many people in that I just didn't even know it was a field. I didn't know it exists, and somebody brought it to my attention because my whole life I had been playing music of, the Filipino diaspora community. And then somebody said, you can go to grad school to do something like, oh, pish, you can't do that. And it turned out to be a real field. And as I looked into it, it really appealed to me because I found out it was a little more on the anthropological side, a little more on the talking with community members side than it was on the pure musical analysis, the kinds of things I had done in music theory. And so I said, well, that sounds like a fabulous field. It is so mythical that I might as well give it a go. I had a kind of a windy path before that anyway, where I wasn't quite sure what my major was going to be. I changed it along the way. I then went into computers, and then ethnomusicology popped up, and it was the one thing that seemed really resonant. It felt really good to me, so that's why I pursued it. I went to UCLA, and people ask me sometimes why I chose UCLA. And in retrospect, when I talk to students, I tell them it's because, it's a big program, it has a storied history, and all those things. Honestly, the reason why I went to UCLA is because they gave me money, right? They gave me money. I went to go see some of the other schools that I could have gone to, and it was in LA. It was sunny. It was beautiful. My brother happened to be in LA. And he said, hey, nobody's going to arrest us if we wander around the building. So we wandered around. I saw the Gamelan room. it was kind of thing that we did on our own. It wasn't even like UCLA didn't have to recruit. They were pretty lucky that way. Or I guess I was pretty lucky because they gave me money. So that's where I ended up going to school. And I feel just like with the field of ethnomusicology, I didn't know the field well until I was in it. I didn't know about graduate school well until I was in it. And so for a lot of my life, I feel like I've been flying by the seat of my pants, but it's kind of worked out. So I chose UCLA because of all of those things that I had mentioned. And I don't have any regrets, actually. I think that other programs are fantastic, but for me, I met some really amazing people. The kind of people that I have more in common with than other people in this world, and they remain my friends decades later. So all in all, I think that going to UCLA was a great choice, but really any school, any school you go to, because the field itself to me is just a remarkable field. So any way you can get into it. Wherever you go, your advisor and the faculty that you have, it's the world is not a thing. It's not the meritocracy that we think it all is, in the sense that if they know people, they can guide you in certain directions, right? They can tell you go here, go there. And ethnomusicology is a small enough field that they know things. So if somebody asks them, hey, do you have a graduate student that, I'm not saying I'm the greatest person, but do you have a graduate student who does some research in this kind of area? Do you think they have a promising career? We're opening up a position, you should encourage them to apply. So that kind of thing helps when you have somebody who is kind of tapped into the field. And that's the thing I think about UCLA that's really helpful, is that they have so many faculty members and people who have experience that they can give very good advice, and then they can help you with the networking and encourage you and so forth. So I feel like at least the beginnings of my career, not my tenure track job necessarily, but the lecturing positions, the things that you get your feet wet, happened because my advisor knew people who said, we need somebody, did someone just graduate? So that was important. Being in Los Angeles is also a really exciting place to be for ethnomusicology because, like New York City, there's all kinds of different communities, there's all kinds of opportunities to do fieldwork research and to practice being an ethnomusicologist before you have to do that scary entrance into the field. And I think that that's the kind of education that gave me confidence. I think a lot of us are really afraid when we're graduate students. Heck, we're afraid when we're faculty to do these things. But to have those opportunities when it's still the formative years, I think that helped me a lot. And I know that as a person, as I became more of a professional in the field, I also the personhood, who I am, also changed. Being an ethnomusicologist has changed who I am, so that even though we can talk heuristically about these things being separate, my profession and my personhood, they're all intertwined in that way. So there's no way that I could talk about how my career arc has gone without tracing all of the things that I did at UCLA and the people I know and the people I've worked with. One of the reasons why going into ethnomusicology was good for me is because I had been doing Filipino music for most of my life before that. And it's such a cliche, right? That a person who comes from somewhere, their family heritage is from here, so of course you should go study there. Now, I'm older, and so that was much more, let's say people didn't question that as much in the past, right? It was a very natural thing for people to do, and it still continues to this day to be natural, even though we wonder whether that's the right approach. But at any rate, it led me to want to look at the music I had been playing, the people I knew, to do the typical things like explore your heritage, but to do it from an angle that was a little bit more intellectually interesting, right? That piqued the curiosity in a way that just traveling as a tourist maybe didn't do. So my initial work at UCLA was to look at Filipino communities and the kind of music that they were playing, to play with them. And then my dissertation work and the work that went into my first monograph was to go to the Philippines and look at the development of nationalism and music and the relationship between those two. And it's really funny now, because if I look back on that, I mean, that was some years ago. My book actually came out in 2011. Within a very short time period, the idea of looking at nationalism in music became really passé, right? People said, oh, you should stop looking at this. Only transnationalism is the thing, and the borders don't exist anymore. And yet now in 29, I'm not justifying the book, I just think it's really funny that we can predict or say these things. But now if you look at it, the surge of nationalism has given it a kind of different meaning, and I certainly would write a different book now. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting to know how some ideas really stick, and how some ways that you can explain, how it is to be human, why it is that we play music. There are sort of these perennial things that cut through history. That's a crazy question, right? Like, what are the things that bring you happiness? I wonder if that's what highlights mean. Because highlights could mean, what are the most exciting moments you had? And I was crossing the street and Mel Gibson was there, But what are the highlights? The highlights have to be, I think getting my PhD was a highlight. I don't know if that's a highlight to other people. To me, it was a highlight because when I was a kid, I always thought, I don't hate school. Right? And there's this thing called a PhD, and you could get it, and I never analyzed the kind of torture that would be, getting a PhD. It just seemed like I was going to go get it. So getting the PhD was kind of like a childhood thing, and when you're a child and you dream these things, you don't ever get to ride the unicorn, and you don't ever get to, fly. But you do get to get a PhD. So that was kind of cool. And I think, not to be too political about it, but I think when you are a woman of color and you've experienced some things in life, being able to start your career in a position to kind of do the whole role model thing, to be the thing that you've never seen before, I think that's what the PhD meant to me. It was like a ticket into something I never really thought that I could do. Some other highlights are the kind of prosaic highlights of life, right? Like, I always thought that I don't know if I'm going to be a good teacher. I think I'm really introverted. I'm not sure if I can deal with people. And then as the years have progressed and I've taught a lot of students, these tiny highlights are things like, they'll come up to you and the excitement in their eyes over this thing that you just talked about in class, the emails they send you 5 years later that say, I heard this music and it made me think of you and the class. I think those things sustain that part of my life I never thought I would be good at. I guess another highlight was, for me, it's not that big a deal for everyone, but for me it was a highlight to get the award for my book, because I think a lot of us also go through imposter syndrome. There's kind of an ebb and flow to whether we feel like we're doing the things we should be doing. And outside validation, you don't really want to discount that. It's a nice thing to have, and so that was a highlight too. One of the things that I try to teach in my courses, we don't do cultural relativism anymore, right? We don't teach it that way anymore. But we do teach respect for other people. We do teach learning how to be in this world with other people, how to understand difference and how we construct the idea of difference, what the illusion of difference and what we make of it. And I think ethnomusicology can be very powerful for that. I think students who hear music that is unfamiliar and then find a way to hear it, appreciate it, not just analyze it, right, but really appreciate what is happening in sound, and then to relate it to the aspects outside of the extra musical things. It's all a growing, slow learning process that you can do with music that I think is really hard to do with other things, right? And I think ethnomusicology allows you to do that with a generation that is, one generation below you and a generation below that, the older we get. So you're reaching people when you really need to reach them. It's a lot harder to reach us just at this age and expect a lot of change. The other thing I think is great about ethnomusicology is it's a field that insists on its own necessity, right? It's a field that doesn't say, we're just going to give in because we're not considered a social science anymore, or we're not in STEM. It's a field that understands the things that it can do for the public good. It's a field that understands its position in helping people to understand other people in a global world. And I think that there are some things in some fields that can do that, but ethnomusicology reaches people because of music. It's that the thing that music can do with affect, with aesthetics, those kinds of things that I think give it an entree into people who might be closed off to more other activities, to other kinds of activities, I guess.